If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for this live stream episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I really appreciate you being here. Wow, what a tangled web we weave. I'll tell you what. The guest I had originally planned for last week's show, she wasn't able to do it due to a sickness in the family. She was sick too. At first, it looked like she was going to be well enough to be able to do it, but then she took a downturn. But yeah, we planned to record that show last week, but due to that illness, she couldn't do it. Well, she's not quite ready to record that show yet, even a week removed. The plan is to have her come on and do a Monday night live stream. But for tonight, I contacted another eyewitness to have him come on. And at 5 p.m., he sent me a message letting me know, Vic, I can't do the live stream tonight. So I had to contact another eyewitness and ask him if he'd be interested in coming on tonight and doing this live stream. So I think you get the picture. It's been a mess, but thank goodness tonight's guest was able to do it and willing to come on and do it. So yeah, thank goodness for that, like I said. Well, without any further ado, let's bring on tonight's guest. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We appreciate your time. Dan, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I am 34. I'm visually impaired. I have 20/20 in my inner hemisphere, but no peripheral. So the best way to describe it would be like direct tunnel vision. I used to attend summer camp as a teenager a lot up in Quincy, California, a little before. I want to say it's almost between Reno. Yeah, along the Reno border. And my encounter happened on 2006 in the summer, I want to say it was about June of 2006.
Well, as the listeners are going to find out, there are intense encounters and there are other encounters that some aren't quite so intense. Others are really too intense. And when you look at the qualities behind your encounter, I mean, there are horror movies made about that. There really are. But we're not going to get into the particulars about what happened just yet. We need to do some talking before we get to that point. But you've already mentioned the fact that you've got limited vision. You're classified as being legally blind. But out of the one eye, you have 20/20 vision. We need to establish this so people can kind of wrap their minds around everything involved when you have this encounter. You're classified as being legally blind, but in one eye you have 20/20 vision, but the area that you see with that one eye, if I understand correctly, it isn't
directly ahead.
Directly ahead of you. Okay, I see. Wow. Well, that would make having the encounter, because you had that exact limited amount of vision when you had your encounter as you do right now, correct?
Correct.
So that must have made the encounter even more difficult, even more traumatic then. Yeah, I'm sure it did. Wow. So sorry to hear you had to go through that. Dan, you used to go to that camp. The camp, was it for visually impaired people? Please don't name the camp, but was this camp for visually impaired people, you said?
Yeah, this particular one was, but they also had camps for like other individuals, like youth programs, but this was a camp for the blind.
Okay, I see. If that's the case, one thing I can't wrap my mind around and figure out is one of the things that is involved with you having the encounter that night in 2008 was you were walking from your cabin to the latrine, and the latrine was over a mile down this trail from where your cabin was. Why would they set up a situation like that where in a camp that was going to be used by visually impaired people, why would they have a situation like that set up where to get to the latrine from any of the cabins, you would have to go even close to a mile? Was that ever
Oh,
brought up?
it was just the men's cabin that was that far out. The female
Okay.
cabins were like 20 feet, 30, 20, 40 feet apart from the restroom.
Wow, yeah, that just doesn't make sense at all that, men's, women's, anyone's cabin being that far away from the latrine if people were going to be using that cabin who were visually impaired. Sounds to me like that camp, they really didn't do a good job thinking things through. Shame on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not good at all. Well, present day, Dan, where are you from a psychological standpoint when it comes to your encounter? Are you still really traumatized? Have you come to terms with it? How do you how do you classify yourself now as being able to deal with it?
Let's see, it still freaks me out, but if anything, I kind of learned to, I don't know if this makes sense, respect it. Almost, if I don't mess with it, it won't mess with me as long as, I'm not in its neck of the woods.
Well,
But I do know they are real and they don't mess around.
yes, they are, and no, they don't. And for you to be in such a healthy mindset, present day, that just shows how resilient you are because, yeah, there are a lot of people who would have a really hard time bouncing back from that experience.
Mm.
From what I understand, you had an interesting conversation with a Native American man about your encounter. What did he have to say that was so interesting?
He was telling me how, in his culture, sometimes these unworldly beings or these natural beings as they are, Dogman, Bigfoot, sometimes I guess they could tell your mental state. So they'll mess with you if they sense an intelligence, they become more cruel. So he said, in a sense, you were kind of lucky and blessed because it was like nature was trying to put you to the test. And in his culture, that's a sign of becoming a warrior or a man is coming out of that test alive.
Well, you were definitely tested, that's for sure.
But
Yeah,
I don't
there's
know
no.
about the blessed part. That was some scary nightmare stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you were blessed. That part I don't agree with at all. But yeah, like I said, you're awfully resilient to be able to be where you are today after such a traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dan, please tell us about that encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right. So, as Vic mentioned, the cabin was about a mile. And at this campground, they trained us to use our canes to fill the gravel path. If you stayed on the gravel path, you knew you were going the right way. But if you veered off the path, it was woodlands, real thick woodlands on either side. Well, I was walking and it was cold and dark, and well, even with my limited vision, I don't like the dark at night, especially out in nature. So I had this big, gigantic flood flashlight with me, one of those big square ones that has the flood beam and then it has the SOS signal. But I didn't have it on. I figured I'm just gonna use my landmarks. Well, I was walking and walking and walking, and then an owl screeched and it startled me, and I began to run, and I plowed right into something big and solid. And whatever it was went, and I thought to myself, great, you ran into a bear. Because there was known to be bears in the area. Well, I backed up really slowly, turned on my flood flashlight, and I was looking around. Did it move? Did it move? Well, directly ahead of me, I didn't. I just saw an immense black shadow, like an outline, and I realized this thing was tall. So I moved my flashlight up, and about I'm like 5'7", so this thing had to be about 8 foot tall. These big, bright red eyes, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the old fashioned Christmas lights that were big and round, big thick bulbs. They were like that, big and red. And this thing started to low growl, and I kid you not, the growling from this creature made my knees shake. And the only thing I could compare it to is when they say when a lion growls or roars, the infrasonics can disembowel their prey. Well, this thing was making me shake and almost throw up. Well, skip back a little bit. I'm sorry. Also, before this thing revealed, I ran into it. The smell of the most foul odor imaginable. Like if you were to take 1,000 dumpsters of meat, garbage, and throw in the smell of sulfur and wet dog, almost smelled like a really bad campfire after you throw the water on it. I mean, this thing stunk. So I stayed still and did all my practice training. They say if it's a bear or something, stand up real tall and make noise. Well, this thing just stared me down with its right eyes, and then I kept hearing swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. And I moved my flashlight around, and I had to see to either my left or my right. I had to move my head. So I saw this thing's long arms and what looked like really long black nails. So at this point, I'm really freaked out. This thing is in front of me. It's intense woodlands on left and right. The only way for me to get out of it is to go back. So I would have to turn my back on this creature. So it started to move towards me. So I turned around and I ran. And I ran and ran and ran. And this thing was keeping up. And I don't know if it was from my praying or whatnot, but every time it flashed its claws, it came in within inches of me. And this thing knew, I honestly have to say, if it really wanted to, it could have taken me because that's how fast it was. It was literally on my heels the whole time. So I run, and I run into the camp restrooms. And these restrooms, it has a little wall partition that separates from the front of the bathroom, and you go around it, and then there's the door. I flew in that bathroom door, slammed it shut, locked it, and this thing came barreling around the corner of this wall and started slamming it at the door. Bam, bam, bam. And the door was shaking. The little, I don't know what to call them, the corner of the door and in the middle, the like metal brackets, were visibly bouncing. And I thought, great, this is how I'm going to die. So I went deeper into the restroom because one of those old shower camp bathrooms that go back like 30 feet. And so I started to take shelter under one of the benches there. This thing knew where I was, went around the restroom, and was clawing and scratching at the door, at the wall, I mean. And then it started to do mind games with me. It would move around and it would go, and it was growling and snarling, and every few seconds it would howl. It would howl real loud. Well, then I noticed, I thought, okay, I'm relatively safe. The windows on this restroom are 14 feet up in the air. This thing was trying, then it started to climb and jump up at the window. I would look up with my flashlight and I would see the red eyes leering in and it would fall back down. This went on for about, it happened at 11:30. I would say about 3:34 it ended. And I just stayed in that bathroom because I knew if I leave this restroom now, I'm going to become dinner for this creature. Well, then I go back to my cabin, praying the whole time and running. Get back to the cabin, crawl into bed. And about 2 hours later, it was time for everyone to go start getting ready and getting up. Well, I got up early because I was already dressed. And I wanted to go see where, if what I saw was really a dream or not. Well, when I arrived back to the bathroom area, there was these 10 blacked out vans and 3 white SUVs. And I'm like, oh, they're loading us up. They're getting us out of here. But then I thought, wait a minute. All the camp vans were white and blue. So, and I see all these people around. Some were armed, some were in camouflage, others were in suits. And this big burly guy came up to me and said, we understand you saw something last night. And I said, well, how do you know? He's like, let's just say we know what goes on and we're tracking these things. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, we've been tracking this one for a while now. And I said, oh, and okay, does the public know about these things? He's like, no, we plan to keep it that way. So if you value your neck, you just shut up and listen. These things are real. They don't like humans. They're the alpha predator out here. And I said, okay, so what are we going to do about it? He said, well, I don't know if you noticed all these men in camouflage, but they're out looking for it. And I said, okay, then what are these other people doing? He said, well, they're cleanup duty. He said, I'm sure you got a good look at its paw prints when you got up here. And I said, yeah. He said, well, you see those guys and those few ladies with the big brooms? They're going up and down the path with a broom and they're brushing them all out. And I said, why? He said, because we don't want the news to know about this. We don't want the public to know about this. And I said, okay. I said, what about the door? I go look at the door. And the time it took them, whenever they got there, they put a brand new door, similar looking door on there. And I said, okay. I said, and I forgot to mention this earlier, I'm sorry, it's just so exciting to tell my story. But when the thing was chasing me, I swung a broom handle at it, and it bit the broom handle. I said, can I take that broom for keepsake? No, we're sending that back to our lab. I'm like, why? He's like, stop asking questions. I'm like, okay. And then there was a guy with camouflage. He came up to me because his boss had to go take a report from his team he sent out. He said, kid, I'm going to let you know now. You can go to the public. No one's going to believe you. But just so you have peace of mind, he said, we have a warehouse in an undisclosed part of the country full of boxes of eyewitness accounts and attacks by these creatures. You think Dogman is the only one out here? He said, you would be surprised what lurks and goes bump in the night. He said, so you may go to the public, but no one's going to really find out about it because people are trained not to believe in ghost stories and not to believe in monster stories, that they can't exist. Well, I learned first time then, that these things were real. And what really creeped me out the most, even after it, was we would hear the sound of really stealthy footsteps at night afterward. And all the adults chucked it up to, oh, that's just deer rustling around at night. That's just. But now after that encounter, I knew a whole lot better what was out there. These things are real. I wouldn't advise anyone to go after them or look for them. So I asked the guy, I said, so you guys are going to go looking for this? I don't think regular weapons are going to help you. He said, son, hold your hand out. And he had this rifle or shotgun. I couldn't tell you what it was. Just he put my hand on the barrel. This thing must have shot shells the size of thermoses. He's like, we got this. Don't worry about it. And just pretend it never happened. Well, there was the campground owner. He came up and said, well, I heard it and I saw what it did to that broom and that door. He said, sir, do you value your life? You're going to keep quiet about this. So after I contacted Vic, after finding out how to contact him, I went on some Facebook groups and posted my encounter. Well, through one of those encounters, I found a message from a couple people that one of them was from the granddaughter of the campground owner at the time. He knew that there was stuff out there. He would always say bear because we would always hear shotgun or rifle fire. Now I think they were shooting at this thing. And they just said, oh, he called it a bear because we don't want to get anyone panicked. And then I got a contact from a unknown person said, message unknown, sender confidentiality, message will delete after you read. And it was a message from one of the team members that said, hi, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Sergeant Jones, National Task Force Forestry. I told you to keep these things quiet. If you keep meddling, something might happen. And I said, before I could write, okay, understood, the message erased. So then I got back in touch with Vic here and filled him on some different things, but that's my encounter in a nutshell. The scariest summer of my life.
Yeah, and then some. Unfortunately, no one should have to go through anything nearly as traumatic as that. The fact that it came after you and it laid siege to that restroom the way it did, which brings me to that first question I've got for you, which is how long was it after that experience before you finally realized that if it wanted to get into that restroom and get you, it could have easily done so?
Oh, I made it into its attack because it was jiggling the door handle.
Oh, sure, it was jiggling the door handle, but if it wanted to, it could have come right through the wall.
Oh, I could have come through that. Those bricks would have not held it back. That metal door wouldn't have kept it out. That thing, I'm pretty sure it could even come up through the ground digging. That thing was built. It had, like I said, with my vision, it looked to me like it had the body of a box. So this thing looked like it had power.
Oh, I'm sure it did, and then some.
I would
And yeah,
say its shoulders were at least 4 feet across from each other. Like this thing was big.
oh, I'm sure it was. And I'm pretty sure you're right. If it wanted to come up through the floor, even it could have done that. That was also an option, which,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's just not good. I'm still wondering, though, you didn't clarify how long was it before you actually realized, okay, if this thing really wanted to get in there at me, it could have easily done so.
I would say 30 seconds to a minute into being in that restroom.
Oh, so it didn't take you very long at all.
Because like every time I would go deeper into that restroom, like I said, it was a pretty long because they had like shower changing areas. It would go to the back. If I went to the back, if I went to the middle, it came through. It was at the middle wall. This thing was determined.
Yeah. It wanted you to think that it was determined, but it was just a show it was putting on. I mean, we've
Mm-hmm.
already established the fact that if it wanted to get in there at you in that restroom, it could have easily done so. So obviously, it was just a performance it was putting on, a sick performance, but an
Mm-hmm.
effective one nonetheless. So,
And
yeah,
I've
you
had
just,
people tell me, "Oh, it was a bear." Trust me, I know what bears look like. I watched tons of bear documentaries. I know what cougars look like and sound like. This thing wasn't bear. It wasn't cougar. It wasn't Bigfoot.
no,
I
you
mean,
saw clearly what it was. It wasn't any of those things. It was a
mm-mm.
dog man. And that behavior is textbook behavior for them,
And I could
unfortunately.
honestly say, running from it, if it really wanted to, it could have just took me out in one blow.
It sure could have. Well, you bumped into it for goodness sakes, which
Mm-hmm.
that's even worse. Did you have any smell on you after bumping into it?
Um, I showered. I showered while I was in there because I was just too busy freaking out. I thought a shower would help because I didn't want this thing to follow me back or get my have my scent on him too hard. If that makes sense.
That does make sense, but with their sense of smell, I'm sure he would have
Mm-hmm.
easily been able to smell you nonetheless. But before you took that shower, did you notice any smell from it on you, possibly?
Yeah, like I said, it smelled like wet dog mixed with campfire smoke. Like when you throw water on a campfire, it smelled like that.
So that's how you smelled before you took that shower.
Yeah.
Wow, that's horrible. Absolutely horrible. How far down the trail were you, though, when you bumped into it?
I would say I got about 30 feet off the path.
30
Because then
feet
to get
onto
back to
the.
the path, I had to run backward. And the way the main road is set up is in a big circle. So I had to go back to the gravel trail, orient myself, and then find out which way to go and just took off that way, just guessing.
So you bumped into this dog man on the way to the restroom, obviously,
Hmm.
but you were just about 30 feet from the end of the trail where the trail ended and the restroom was there when you
No, I
bumped
got
into him?
30 feet off of the main pathway. Like, I took the wrong turn. I went actually into the woods.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I knew you got lost, but if you had to guess, how far away from your cabin? You left your cabin, you headed down the trail, and then you
I
got
would
lost.
say
How far
I
down do you
was
think you were?
about maybe a quarter of a mile away.
About a quarter mile, so pretty close to being too far away for anyone to hear you.
Hmm. And then I found out recently from some counselors that used to work there with us. I come in contact with them every now and then at the blind center I go to. They said, "Oh, we heard you scream and we heard the growls and howls and noises, but we were too afraid to do anything about it." I'm like, "Oh, thanks."
Yeah, that was nice of them. I guess the only thing missing was a bucket of popcorn.
Yeah,
Yeah, they could have just sat down with a bucket of popcorn, it sounds like. They had no concern on helping you,
nope.
unfortunately.
But oh man, to those people that want to go looking for them, I highly recommend don't bother. They'll have your scent. They're probably on the trail and you wouldn't even recognize them in broad daylight.
Oh, no doubt about that. There's no future in that. There really isn't. How do you think it knew where you were in the restroom when it couldn't see you? You talked about the windows being up so high where it had to jump to look in,
I would have to say
but
this thing was kind of intelligent. It knew the layout because it would start messing, scratching, clawing at one part of the wall, and then it would like it systematically went to every inch of the wall. Like I don't know if it could smell through the wall or just sense, but it knew where to make me jump. If that makes sense.
well, if that restroom had block walls, cinder block walls, there's no way it could have smelled through the walls, maybe a crack around a window or something like that. But that still doesn't explain how it knew exactly where you were unless it had supernatural qualities. Have you thought much about that possibility?
I would say maybe, but I do know that they did keep like two or three of those windows open just to keep the bathrooms from smelling muggy or musky. So I guess they could have used that too, but I don't know. But it would find where I was every time, and tell you what, it was the most terrifying thing ever.
Oh, I'm sure it was. And also, that's something interesting you just mentioned. Yeah, if some of the windows were open, there's a strong possibility it was just listening and it heard where you were. That's how
Hmm.
it knew where to find you. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. Did anything ever happen to you after you left the camp that you think just might have been Dogman related?
Well, I didn't feel comfortable the rest of that camp trip. Like every time I went outside, even in broad daylight, I was scanning around. People thought, "Oh, you're just being paranoid. You're afraid. You're a sissy." But I kind of knew firsthand what was out there. And there was a few times after those visits where we would be walking around and you would hear a bird flying through, and then you would hear it get snatched out of the air, and you would hear crunching. So that thing stuck around for a while.
And from the things you've told me about that camp, they knew they had a problem. Shame on them for allowing people to still come there without
Mhm.
warning them. They should have just shut the place down. Shame on them.
And it was interesting because before the whole encounter, in this town of Quincy, they have a giant, humongous pond that used to be part of a lumber pond or a sawmill. And there was an old man out there, and he came up to me and said, "You're going to this camp?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Those bumps you hear in the dark, those aren't bear, those aren't coyotes." He said, "I would watch your back and hope to God it never finds you."
Well, if that isn't an ominous warning, I don't know what is.
And so I thought at first, guy was just trying to scare a teenager, city dweller kid coming out here, but no.
Yeah, I'd say he knew something. He knew what was going on.
Mhm.
For everyone listening, if you have any questions you want me to ask Dan, please go ahead and get those ready and post them now. Be sure to post them in all caps, though, so I don't miss them. Thank you. Dan, how many years had you been attending that camp before you had that experience?
I was attending it 3 years.
So 3 years. Had anything happened in any of those prior years that seemed kind of off?
Well, we would do night hikes, and the whole point of the night hike was to welcome new camp initiates and scare the daylights out of them. And I always didn't like them because it felt like something was out there more than just the adults running around acting like idiots trying to scare kids.
Yeah, shame on them for doing that. That's
Like
not
you
good.
would actually, I don't know if this makes sense. You could just feel evil in the air.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people who've had experiences with these guys who swear up and down all day long that they have supernatural qualities, and I wouldn't argue with that. I mean, they've done so many things and do so many things that point soundly towards that being a reality that, yeah, they just might be right about that.
And then a few times you would hear, and whenever that happened, I just stuck close to a group. But now that I knew it was out there, that group, staying with a group wouldn't have done nothing. It would have been just sardines in a can.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Had a captive audience, that's for sure. Considering how frightening that experience was, have you set foot in the woods by yourself since you had that experience?
No, absolutely not.
Do you have any plans on doing so in the future?
I want to, but not to sound like everyone else. If I ever go back out there, I want a gun that works. That's more than just your basic hunting weapon.
Yeah, but I mean,
But
that's
I
just
wouldn't
a
go out
false
in the
sense of
woods to be honest
security
if you paid
there.
me.
That's just a false sense of security there. I've
Mhm.
mentioned this in several shows before. People talk about how they're going to take a gun out into the woods and protect themselves consequently from a dogman attack. These guys are so comfortable and so skilled out there in the woods. I don't care what kind of top-notch outdoorsman or outdoors woman you think you are. I don't care if you can light a campfire with a blue angel. A dog man that wants to sneak up on you and take you out, it can do that with ease. So don't kid
Mhm.
yourself. Having a gun, that doesn't protect you from a dog man that's got it in its head to take you out at all. And that's a fact.
And the way that it's so fast, it can get the jump on someone. I believe in a second. Like, it wouldn't take that gun wouldn't be able to aim in time.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Like I said, I mean, if they want to take you out, they can do it at will, really
Mhm.
easily. Well, let's get to some of the listeners' questions now. The first one is from Audacious Amber. And Amber wants to know, do you remember any special equipment they had, like a device to affect its hearing? Do you remember seeing anything else about the cleanup or militant people of interest? Of course, you mentioned that big rifle, if you could call it that.
Yeah,
But
they also had what looked like dog whistles, really big dog whistles. And from what I researched on these things from people that go out on the know, they like hurt their ears and make them whimper and whine.
Yeah, on episode 190 of the show, Brandon Close talked about seeing one of the alphabet agencies. Someone came out there and used a type of dish type device to hurt the dog man's ears, apparently. So
Hmm.
it's not unprecedented.
They also have a supersonic thing they hook up to a microphone and blare.
You saw them? They had that also?
Yeah, it was in one of their gearboxes.
Wow, sounds like they brought all kinds of goodies out then.
But to be perfectly honest, I don't think they would honestly have worked. If that thing was that big, I think it would just be piss it off even more.
Yeah, just might be right about that. DJ Chris Mack, I'm having a hard time understanding his question. I think he's saying you were very lucky, Dan. And then his
Hmm.
question is, do you think it was so mad from you bumping into it? Also, did it slash at you every time that you prayed as you ran from it?
Yes. Like you would feel the air of its claws. Like that's how close it was.
Yeah, shame on it for doing that. Of course, it was just trying to get a response out of you. I mean, as fast as it was, it could have easily just run right up to you if it wanted to do that, but
Hmm.
it was clearly doing that for full effect to try and terrify you even more. Like I said, shame on it for doing that. That's horrible. Absolutely horrible. It really is. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't mad at you for bumping into it. I'm sure it's pretty happy that you
Yeah, I
bumped
think it
into it
wanted to,
because
like a dog wanting to play. If you can call it that.
I'm
Like I think it.
sorry. What did you say? I didn't hear the first
Oh,
part.
sorry. I thought it. To be honest, I thought it wanted to play like some twisted like. Oh, you want to play tag? You want to play fetch?
Well,
I
it
mean,
would
if
have
it
been
really
nice.
wanted to, it knew. I don't think it was angry. I think it was just wanted to mess with me and see how far it could go.
Yeah, that's it's good you understand that because, yeah, I've got no doubts that's what was behind it chasing you the way it did or running behind you more accurately the way it did. But yeah,
And
that's
to
just
be honest,
awful.
not to cut anyone's comments off, I even think it knew I had an eye condition.
Why do you think that?
Because before it lunged, it would go from side to side.
Yeah, it might have known somehow. It's hard to say. There are people who swear up and down who've had encounters with these things that they've experienced mind speak. So if they can do that, maybe they do know things like that about us that other people wouldn't be privy to, information they wouldn't be privy to and know.
Hmm.
So that's possible. This next question is from Glenn Kamada. And Glenn wants to know, have you heard of Dogman or had you? I think that should read, had you heard of Dogmen prior to your encounter?
Yes, and to be honest, most people are gonna laugh. I used to watch Monster Quest a lot as a teenager. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that show on Animal Planet.
Oh, I think everyone listening is. That's a staple. That's a great show.
And so I knew it from that, but I always thought it was campfire stories to scare people or, you know, terrifying tales in the dark, but nope, it's real.
Yeah, they definitely are. Do you think watching Monster Quest the way you did, do you think that kind of prepared you in a way for having that experience?
Yes, because there was an episode with the, I want to say it was the North American Dogman episode, and it talked about how cool and calculating it was, and how one of the researchers said he knew to stand his ground, not to show fear. So I kind of knew all that from that show.
Well, that's good. It sounds like it did prepare you in a way for that experience.
But man, tell you what, between that show and the real life incident, can't compare.
Oh, of course you can't. Yeah, there's no comparison whatsoever. That's just watching a TV show compared to
Mm-hmm.
real life. So, yeah, you're right. This next question up is from Audacious Amber, and she wants to know, do you think it was trying to speak? Any mind speak?
I would say yes, because to be perfectly honest, there was times when I would hear inside my head, "Stop running, just surrender,"
Wow.
or I even had the inclination that it was trying to tell me to turn around and look. And I always just told myself, well, if you turn around and stop, it's going to get you even worse.
Well, maybe yes, maybe no. But yeah, the fact that it was not only running behind you the way it was, but it was trying to tell you to stop. I don't understand that part though, because it could have caught you easily at
Yeah.
will. So why bother telling you to stop? I guess it probably did that just to heighten your fear even more, if that was
Mm-hmm.
possible.
But I tell you what, the whole thing of getting up real tall and shouting like you do at a bear, it don't do nothing. It, if anything, it smiles.
Yeah. Well, these things, like I told you in our conversation, our private conversation, the most recent one, they're so intelligent. They know when you're doing things like that. You're just trying to bluff them, and they
Mm-hmm.
know that they've got you so outclassed. There's nothing you can do to them. So while it might work on a black bear, it's not going to work on them. There's no
Mm-mm.
way. No way at all. This next question up on deck is from Neshoba. And Neshoba wants to know, did the man who told you about the cleanup seem to be a local or from somewhere else?
I would say somewhere else, because he didn't, how to put it, he just acted like he didn't belong in that area. And if all the equipment they had, I want to say he was some kind of tracker or researcher.
Yeah, he just might have been. And it sounds like you've got your own dogman in the background
Oh
back
yeah,
there.
sorry for his barking.
Oh, that's all right. That's life. There's only so much you can do about that. This next question is from Andre Soares. And Andre wants to know, have you encountered other paranormal phenomena or know others who have seen the dog man? What theories do you believe best explain these sightings?
Well, I've known a few people that have seen Dogman where I do a lot of traveling. I listen to some of these podcasts, and sometimes I don't have my headphones in. I had a guy a couple years back telling me how he was hunting up in Georgia with his cousins, and he said that it felt like they were being stalked all night long. He said, and his two cousins, one was an Army Ranger and the other was a off-duty sniper, and that they were so tripped out that they left after the first night.
Well, I can understand why.
And then there was another gal told me that her a story about her and her dad. They were out hunting raccoons up in Michigan, and they said it sounded like something was tearing apart a mountain lion because they heard a mountain lion roar, and then they said all they heard was scratching and clawing. And she said after that night, her dad, who was a seasoned hunter for many years, never went back out in the woods.
Yeah, I'll bet he didn't. That has a way of motivating you to stay out of the woods. It really does.
But as far as me seeing other things, I've encountered, I don't know how to describe it, ghostly demonic things. I've seen things that shouldn't exist. And my only thing, I guess, is just don't show fear as best you can.
Yeah, your options are awfully limited when it comes to experiences like this with dogmen. But yeah, not showing fear, that's easier said than done. If you can pull that
Mm-hmm.
off, then The bad part of it is they're gonna know how frightened you are anyway from the pheromones
Yeah.
you're putting off and just reading your body language. I mean, there's trying not to show fear, but it's still being evident to an expert,
Yeah, it's still
such as the
showing to
dog
them.
or such as them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Dan, let's do the best we can not to interrupt each other.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. The next, whoops, before I mention that, I've got a donation from Bang Bang. Thank you so much, Bang Bang. I really appreciate it, but I made a comment on the last show. It's awfully nice of you who have been making donations, but instead of sending in donations for me, please just support these eyewitnesses and if you can do that, the more you can support them, the better. I mean, I'd much rather see you just support the guests than to send in donations for me. Again, that's awfully appreciated, very nice of you, but I just wanted to put that out there for you. All right. This next question is from that's already been answered about the paranormal experiences. I can take that one off. This next one up is from Todd Bettina. Todd wants to know were you the only one at the camp who had experiences? If so, did you speak with them?
I was the only one. Like I said, the adults heard, and I just found that out as of last year.
So you found out that you weren't the only one then.
Yeah, like the adults heard it, but they didn't see what it actually was.
Well, there's a difference between hearing one out there or more than one out there and actually having an encounter. It sounds like you didn't hear of anyone else actually having an encounter with one.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. And like I said before, they clearly knew they had a problem there at that camp. Shame on them for allowing people to come there and be basically hung out to dry. That's what they were doing, unfortunately. This next question is from the Cryptid Wrangler, and they want to know, Dan, do you think it may have taken advantage of your ability not to be able to see you close up?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like I told you before we started recording tonight, I'm pretty sure that it knew somehow, it knew that your sight was compromised and it probably did take advantage of that. These guys are masters at manipulating us and taking advantage. So somehow I think it probably did play on that.
Hmm.
The next one up is from Jerry Cahill. And Jerry wants to know, do you think invoking Jesus would help?
Yeah, because like I said, I was praying out loud, and every time I mentioned God's name or Jesus, how would he put it? 'Cause it was still charging, but it would like not seem as fierce, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Um, I would say it kind of did because it would kind of like stop for like a second, but then it just kept coming.
Well, there are a lot of people out there who swear invoking Jesus is a magic bullet that'll send these guys packing, never to come back. So
Hmm.
it's interesting to hear you say that you did invoke Jesus and it worked momentarily, but it kept on coming after that. So apparently that's not a magic bullet. This next question up is from Scott Baker, and Scott wants to know, did your guest recall any UFO reports before, during, or after researching?
Um, there was one, and I just thought at the time that it was just a giant airplane, but there was like six lights up in the sky, but the way they were set up was like it was like a triangle facing a triangle, if that makes sense. Like at the two tops of the two most at the triangle. How do you put it? If the point of the triangles are facing each other, that's how the lights were.
Huh. Well, I'm sure it's not lost on you that you're far from the only eyewitness to report seeing something like that possible UFO activity,
Mhm.
either right before or right after a dogman encounter. You're not alone in that at all by a long shot. Does that mean they're connected somehow? It makes you wonder. There's a strong possibility they are, but all we can do is guess on that. This next question you answered when you were telling us about your encounter. It's from Bang Bang. She wants to know if it smiled at you. And from what you said, it did grin at you,
Yeah,
correct?
it did grin. Like it knew what it was doing, and it almost looked like it was having fun of it.
Oh, I'm sure it was. What a sicko. The next one is from Uncaged Savage. Good name. Any remembrance of weird fog or mist in and around the same time?
Yes, I'm actually glad that person brought that up. Thank you. But before I stumbled into it, like I mentioned, when you know how if you have a raging campfire and you throw water on it, and that all that smoke and billows, it was like that. And then the smell. Oh my god, the smell was just terrible. But yeah, there was like a big flash of smoke.
Huh, does make you wonder what's behind that. But there's so many things these guys do that make you wonder that.
Mhm.
Definitely. This next question up is from Ryan Scott. And Ryan wants to know, do you think it was playing a sick game of hide and seek, possibly?
I would say it wanted to, because like I said, it would dart from side to side, in and out of the light.
Hide and seek, I don't know if that's a good way to sum it up. More like cat and mouse.
Yeah, more
Although,
like.
yeah, it didn't want to actually catch you the way a cat would want to catch a
Mhm.
mouse. But I think that's a better comparison there. This next question up is from Audacious Amber. And Amber wants to know, were the ears on top of its head or on the side? And also, did you see a tail?
I think it couldn't make out if it had a tail, but the ears were on the sides, but they were pointed straight up. If that makes sense.
So they were on the sides of its head, but still
Mhm.
pointing straight up.
Mhm.
Okay, I see.
But if you looked up at its head, you could tell they were constantly twitching.
If its ears were on the sides of its head, that makes me wonder what its leg structure was like. I didn't hear you mention that.
Um, when I did look down, I would say the legs were long and very muscular. If that, I don't know how to describe them, but they almost just look like a really big man's legs. If that makes sense.
So it had knees and ankles instead of stifled joints in the hocks the way a dog would.
No, I don't know. Like, and I'm not saying it had like human legs, but the it had like doggish legs, but the way they were wide, they were as wide as a human's. They weren't like normal dog looking legs.
I see. Okay. It sounds like it was pretty darn close to you, and you didn't get a good look at it, so I'm not sure you'll know the answer to this question, but when you would see it jump up and look through the window at you when you're in the restroom, you'd mentioned seeing its eyes glow. And then
Mhm.
when you were running, you thought you were running for your life from it out there in the woods. And
Mhm.
understandably so. I fully understand why you did run from it. But at any time when you did look at it and see its eyes, did you ever get to see eye glow like a and when you did see eye glow, did you notice anything strange about that eye shine that made you thought, "Oh, well, that's unusual." Of course,
I'm
outside of
glad
the
you
fact that
actually
you're
remember
looking at
that.
a dog
Brought
man.
that up. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Yes, because a few times I shown my flashlight because I did hear about ice shine from like Monster Quest, and these things almost look like fiery pits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
I mean, you could just, they glowed evil. There is no other word, but they glowed evil.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Was there anything else about its eyes that made you think, wow, that's really strange?
They were almost hypnotic.
Yeah. A
Like
lot of
it would
people,
look at you, and you when it locked eyes, it almost like felt like it was reading your soul.
yeah, a lot of eyewitnesses have reported that feeling almost like it was trying to steal their soul when it was staring at them. So that's not unprecedented. The next one up is from David Seal, and David wants to know, is there still a military base near the mountain range?
You know, that's the funny thing. I never did find out about that. But when I was getting interviewed by that investigator, one of their vans had tons of computer screens, and they were talking about how they monitor all these things around. I don't know if they follow like migration patterns or go after strays, but they had cameras on these things apparently.
Well, if they are able to track them, maybe that's how they do it. Maybe it's via drones or something else. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure
Hmm.
about that. This next one up is from Andres Carrizales, and Andres wants to know, was the camp near any government owned forests with no public access?
I, to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know.
Hmm.
You didn't really have any reason to know, so no harm, no foul. David Seal also wants to know, the men you saw, were they more like military or do you think they were from a different agency?
I would say maybe different agency, but they did have camouflage outfits on and combat boots. And they had fancy binoculars strapped to their chests and different get-ups. Like one person had, because I asked him what they were, he had infrared and sonar detectors on him. So I think they had, if they wanted to, they had night troops and day troops to deploy.
They probably do. They've got so many resources, endless resources. They probably do. They've got all these angles covered. That's a given. Dreamer's Nightmare wants to know, were its hands like raccoon hands?
The only thing I could tell about the hands is that the claws were sharp and black. I don't know if that helps. I'm sorry.
Oh, no need to apologize. I mean, you thought you were running for your life. So trying to study its hands or any other anatomical features, that's going to be the last thing on your mind. So
Hmm.
that's understandable there. Don't blame you at all. The next one up is from Uncaged Savage, and they want to know, did it run like a person? Did it have straight legs? You already mentioned the fact that it had dog like legs, but when it ran, did it still run like a person?
Yeah, it did run upright.
Well, I think what they want to know is, they knew that it was running upright, but did it lunge in a way that was inhuman, or did it have a human style gait to it?
It had a human style gait, but it would do, I call it like speed bursting, where it would get like right up on your heels and it would fall back and then it would like tow your feet that way.
Yeah, that's horrible. Again, one more thing it could do, and it knew full well that by doing that, it would just panic you that much more. Like we talked about before we started recording tonight. No, I think this was earlier today when we were talking. As a matter of fact, we talked about how these guys, they really do know how to push our buttons. They're masters at that. Bang Bang wants to know, Dan, was it robotic in movement or fluid?
It was fluid. Like there was nothing slow or robotic about it.
That's weird. Sometimes these guys do move in a jerky, maybe kind of quasi robotic way. Other
Like when
times
it
they're
would
really
take off, it
smooth.
was kind of like almost. Now that you mention it, it would like shake from foot to foot almost. I don't know how to describe it, but it would walk, but it was almost like it was bouncing as it walked.
It would bounce when it walked?
Not like bounce, but it would like go from foot to foot, like back and forth for a while. I don't know how to describe it.
I think I understand what you're saying. I don't know what's behind the way some of these guys move in such strange ways. I don't know what's behind that at all. On one hand, some of them, when they're standing there, they look awkward and kind of jerky. And then when they transition into running, even bipedally, they're really fast and they can run like it's going out of style. I just don't understand that. You would think that if they're unsteady, just standing there, if they look like they're, some eyewitnesses have compared it to looking like a woman in really high heels. They look a little unsteady
Yeah, it did look like
and
you could like push it over if you wanted to, but I didn't
yeah.
want to get that close.
So how do you transition from that awkwardness? And then when you start running, you can run like it's going out of style. It's just hard for me to understand. I don't get that. But that's how they are in a lot of cases. This next question is from DJ Chris Mack, and he wants to know, are you expecting a follow-up from the cleanup crew for going public? They seem very open to give info to you. Also, do you live far from the encounter and expect another Dogman visit at home?
I hope not. I live about, from the campsite, I'm about 2.5 hours away.
Oh, good. I'm glad you live so far.
And as far as feds, if they really wanted me, they could easily get me through two people search or anything like that. So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, it's good you realize that. If the feds were that concerned about keeping people from talking about them, I would have been shut down a long time ago. They're
Mhm.
just concerned about their existence not being officially proven. As long as we
Mhm.
don't try to prove their existence, and more importantly, have evidence to prove their existence, then they could care less. One guy who
And I
got a
honestly,
nasty phone call, he actually was told by the operative who called him in the middle of the night, talk about them until you're blue in the face. But their problem, the reason why this person was contacted in the first place, was they had evidence, I guess you could say, that was a little too good to be putting out there for the government's comfort.
mhm.
So, yeah, I think you're going to be just fine. The next question is from Amelia Raucho. And Amelia wants to know, when you bumped into the dog man, was his or her fur rough?
Yes, it felt almost. I don't know if anyone's been to a Bass Pro Shop or a Cabela's and you go up to where the grizzly bears are standing. It felt like that fur, but like 100 times thicker and like matted.
That's the weird thing about these guys. Some of them, they let their coats are matted and nasty and all of that. Others, they look like they stepped out of a salon. It really makes you
Mhm.
wonder why some look so neat and others are so unkept.
Maybe it's like the Warriors ones are the ones that are always like unkept.
Yeah, might be onto something there. That's a good point. This next question is from Julie A. Thurston, and Julie wants to know, are you planning to return to this camp again in the future?
Nope.
Can't say
Because
I
even
blame
with
you.
4 cabin walls, I wouldn't want to test it.
Can't say I blame you. Once bitten, twice shy. And in my opinion, I do think that would be putting too much weight on a young back. I mean, you are dealing with this experience very well, but I think it would be a mistake to go back to where that dogman might be and tempt another encounter to happen. It's a good move there. The next question is from Jerry Cahill. And Jerry wants to know, did the research team only interview you or did they talk with anyone else?
They only talked to me because they didn't want to bring others into it because they were trying to keep it hush hush. And the way they were moving about, the ones out in the field, they were like super duper quiet. So like they knew what they were doing, gathering information, but they were going as stealth as they could.
And they're probably keeping you a pretty good distance away from everyone else when they're asking you those questions, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. That's SOP. I'm not surprised they did. Well, we've got one more question here I'm going to ask you, and that's from Jimmy Murray. And Jimmy wants to know, are they all about creating human fear to feed off the negative energy we create? That's more of a general question that I'm going to try to answer. We don't really know why they do what they do. When you look at all of the cases out there that I've been exposed to, talking with eyewitnesses, I mean, that, in my opinion, is the only logical explanation for why they force these encounters to happen with eyewitnesses. I mean, they could clearly grab these eyewitnesses and kill them, eat them, do whatever they want to do. But in almost every case, they don't do that. So, yeah, it apparently does come down to fear. It could be something as innocent, and I use that word very loosely. It could come down to something as innocent as them just getting their kicks by frightening people the way a schoolyard bully likes to frighten other smaller kids. It could be as simple as that. Or maybe they do actually somehow feed off of the fear in some kind of a strange paranormal way. So why they do that? I mean, that's just a question I don't think we're ever going to have the answer to. All we can do is guess on that. But having said all that, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share with the listeners, Dan?
Just only if you go out the woods, keep your eyes and ears on a swivel. If things sound too stealth, moving about, get out of there as soon as you can. Because watched so many documentaries. Bears are clunky, wolves are clunky. These things are going for as stealth as possible, and if it gets deathly quiet and you smell an odor, just go about face, get back to your vehicles, and don't even go. And just stay safe. Inform your family if you're going out in the woods, and just pray.
Well, that's all really good advice. Very good advice. Dan, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight's show, especially on such short notice. I really do appreciate it. And please remember down the road, if you ever do need help, again, we've already established the fact that you're dealing with that encounter very well now, but down the road, for some reason, if you do need help, please do let me know because I'll always be there for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, having said that, thanks again so much for coming on and have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see ya.
See you later.
Well, that's another one in the books, everyone. Like I touched on earlier, we're going to have another show coming up Monday night, and then I'm going to air another show Wednesday night, and then another show Friday night. So I've got 3 shows booked for this week. So pretty much every other day of the week, you've got a new episode to listen to. But like I say at the end of every show, if you've had a Dogman encounter of your own that you'd like help with, and all you have to do is just go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report, and let me know. If you do that, then I'll contact you and schedule a phone consultation so we can find out what's wrong, and we'll take it from there. Same thing holds true if you want to just come on the show and share your experience the way that Dan did tonight, or any of the other guests have. Please just go to the website, submit a report, and I'll contact you to get that set up. But having said that, thanks again so much for listening, everyone. I really do appreciate it, and have a great night.